Welcome to the True Tomorrows podcast. Buckle up for our weekly science fiction probe.
That's right.
We're diving into a couple of wild galactic tales from the world of flash fiction, kind of like blockbuster films or those best-selling epic stories, but condensed into, bite-sized adventures.
Right.
So hit that rate button and follow the show for more captivating True Tomorrows. This week, you sent in 2 flash fiction stories that really piqued our interest. We're eager to really dig into the narratives and see if we can unearth some surprising insights.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what we find.
So let's launch right into this science fiction probe, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay, so the first flash fiction story is called Mutiny in the Void. Right off the bat, it throws us into a galaxy controlled by, these massive corporate empires, right?
Uh-huh.
But what's really cool is who's rising up to challenge them.
Right.
It's a stealth ship crew, and they call themselves the Blackstar Pirates. And it's not your typical rebel fleet,
Yeah, not all.
It's definitely unconventional. What were your initial thoughts on this setup?
Well, right away I was struck by how the story kind of flicks the script on what we typically think of as piracy, Like, it's not about treasure or loot, it's about information.
Right.
The Blackstar Pirates, they're using their skills to basically steal data, the very thing these corporations depend on to expose their shady practices.
It's almost like information warfare instead of cannons and lasers, right?
Exactly. Makes you think about what truly holds power in any system, right? Is it brute force or can information be just as potent a weapon?
Yeah. That's a really great point. And the crew itself is fascinating, too. We've got Captain Ash, who's described as this unconventional leader. You don't immediately picture a ruthless tyrant, right? It's more like someone who's clever and resourceful.
Right.
And then there's Finn, the pilot. He's got this reputation for being, trigger happy. So, a little bit of a wild card there.
Yeah, it definitely adds an element of unpredictability.
Definitely. And then you've got Cham. He's like the tech whiz, the brains behind their whole operation. And Nix, he's like the smooth talker, the charismatic negotiator.
Right.
Adds this whole layer of social manipulation to their tactics.
Right. So it's not just about hacking. It's about, persuasion and influence as well.
Exactly. And then rounding out the crew, we've got Eli. He's the new recruit. A little bit clumsy, maybe not quite up to speed yet. You can almost see the potential for some comedic moments there, but also, maybe a really interesting character arc.
Right.
So what is this kind of crew, this kind of ragtag bunch? What does that tell us about how challenges to power actually emerge?
I think it suggests that big changes, they don't always come from the sources we expect. It's not always the big powerful figures or institutions, like this diverse group with their unique skills and maybe even flaws. It shows how different kinds of expertise and even a little bit of unpredictability, that can be really important when you're going up against the establishment.
Yeah, it's not always the polished general leading the charge, right?
Exactly. Makes you think about those real world movements. They rarely have a single unified front.
So getting back to the Blackstar Pirates, they're heists. They're not about grabbing loot or cargo, right? It's all about information warfare. And there's this really cool scene where they target a Frontier Corps supply convoy. Cham uses his scramblers to disrupt their communications. Nix uses his charm to kind of gain access. And it's all for data, not physical stuff.
Right. It's a really clever way to portray that kind of asymmetric warfare, but in this futuristic setting. Yeah.
And it really underscores how vulnerable these huge corporations can be.
Absolutely. And I think, it also reflects a very real vulnerability in our own world, which is becoming more and more digital. These corporations, they rely on information for everything: control, logistics, even maintaining their public image.
Right.
So when the Blackstar Pirates target that information, they're striking at the very core of their power. We see it today with, the concerns over cybersecurity and how data breaches can cripple even the most powerful organizations.
So true. But then the story takes this really interesting turn. And it's because of, classic rookie mistake that Eli, he hits the wrong button.
Oh, no.
And suddenly, Frontier Corps isn't just in the dark. They're tracking Blackstar. And where are they tracking them to? Not some hidden pirate base, but to a colony that's facing a desperate oxygen shortage. The stakes just went way up.
Yeah. And it completely changes the narrative, doesn't it? It's no longer just about exposing corporate greed. It's about the survival of these colonists.
Right.
It forces the Blackstar crew to confront the real consequences of their actions, both intentional and unintentional. And I think it challenges their self-perception as these roguish data thieves.
Yeah, they can't just slip away with the data this time. They're kind of stuck.
Right.
And of course, Frontier Corps cruisers show up, all menacing and ready to shut things down. But Captain Ash, she comes up with this really audacious plan, like totally improvised right on the spot.
Makes you wonder what she would have done if Eli hadn't messed up.
I know, right? So she sends Nix to stall them. Cham's like frantically trying to hack into their systems. And Eli, surprisingly, is tasked with manning the ship's turrets.
Wow.
It's pure chaos, but also like really clever.
Well, yeah. I mean, it really highlights their adaptability, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the firepower or resources of Frontier Corps, so they have to rely on their wits and each other's strengths. It shows that, the best solutions, they often come out of necessity and thinking on your feet.
And then Ash takes it even further. She impersonates a Frontier Corps exec over the open comms, essentially accusing the cruisers of threatening this humanitarian aid convoy, which of course is them.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And then she manages to get this actual Frontier Corps bigwig on the line and proceeds to tear into him publicly while broadcasting the whole thing. The audacity.
I love it.
It's amazing.
Talk about a power move.
It totally shifts the narrative, right? Suddenly Frontier Corps is the bad guy.
Absolutely. I mean, Ash is using their own authority and their carefully crafted image against them. By framing it as a humanitarian effort and then humiliating one of their top people, she buys them time, but she also completely undermines them in the public eye.
Right. And it makes you think about how much power public perception really has.
It does.
And how quickly a carefully constructed narrative can just fall apart.
Yeah.
What does that tell us about how to challenge powerful entities in our own world, right?
Yeah. It's a question worth considering for sure. What's the role of spectacle, of public outcry? How much can that influence those in power?
And the best part is, it works. Eli manages to hold off the cruisers. Ash's broadcast goes viral. Frontier Corps is scrambling to do damage control.
And the colony gets the oxygen they need.
They do. Supplies get rushed in.
Yeah.
Frontier Corps is in full PR nightmare mode. And the Blackstar pirates, well, they become these accidental heroes. It's the classic underdog story, but in space with data as their weapon.
I love it. It's such a satisfying ending, even if it's a little messy.
Yeah, and the story ends with this really nice, quiet moment between Ash and Eli. And she kind of acknowledges his potential. She hints that there's still a lot of injustice out there in the galaxy.
Yeah.
So it wraps up this particular adventure, but it also suggests that their work is far from over.
Right. It leaves us with a sense that the fight continues, even with this victory, the larger struggle is far from over. Ash's words, they highlight how deeply rooted these problems are, and that this accidental act of heroism, it's just one small step in a much bigger battle.
Yeah, there's always another fight, another battle, another injustice to uncover.
Exactly. It's a reminder that real change takes time and continued effort.
Okay, so we've traveled through this galaxy of corporate control and witnessed the rise of these unlikely heroes. Let's shift gears now and turn to our second flash fiction story, Past as Prologue. This one drops us right into a modern-day Middle East peace summit, but with this fascinating twist. They've brought in a clone of Saladin.
Talk about a unique approach to conflict resolution.
Right. Who thinks of that? It's this collision of, historical legacy and contemporary issues, right?
Right. It immediately makes you wonder, can the past actually offer any solutions to the problems of the present?
Yeah, can we learn from history? Or are we doomed to repeat it?
Big questions.
Big questions, for sure. So the story, it starts off pretty familiar. A peace conference, totally stalled. Israeli and Palestinian delegates kind of stuck in their positions. Then Yasir, the clone of Saladin, enters the room, and as you'd expect, things get interesting.
Yeah.
But his approach isn't what you might think. He doesn't immediately pick a side. Instead, he starts drawing parallels to historical conflicts, specifically the Crusades. What do you make of that?
Well, By bringing up the Crusades, he's invoking this period of intense conflict, in the same region, but one that eventually saw, moments of coexistence and shifting alliances.
So he's trying to broaden their perspective.
Exactly. He's stepping outside the immediate, very polarized viewpoints and offering this wider lens.
That's really clever.
It is, It's like he's saying, look, this isn't the first time this region has seen conflict, and it wasn't always this way.
Right. So maybe there's another way.
Maybe.
And it's not just about grand historical speeches either. Like, the story shows Yasir spending his nights just reflecting on the city, on the patterns of history, and the challenge of breaking free from those patterns.
Right. It shows that he's not just some kind of, historical puppet, right?
Yeah.
He's really grappling with the weight of history and the human cost of these conflicts. And I think that makes him, a much more compelling character.
Yeah, it makes his actions more genuine.
It does.
Like, he's not just repeating history, he's trying to understand it.
Exactly.
And then, we see this really interesting alliance form between Yasir and Miriam. She's an aide to the Israeli delegation. And they both kind of share this frustration with the lack of progress. And they decide to shift their focus to more practical, smaller scale solutions, like things like water rights, trade, refugee resettlement. So it's less about high-level politics and more about meeting people's basic needs.
Right. It's about building trust and cooperation from the ground up. Starting with those areas where you can actually see mutual benefit.
That makes a lot of sense.
And where progress can have an immediate positive impact on people's lives.
So it's almost like bypassing those bigger political hurdles.
In a way, yeah. I think it's a recognition that those grand political agreements, they've been really elusive.
And it's interesting how this approach, it sparks this whole wave of resistance. Both sides accuse them of betrayal.
Right. It shows how deep those divisions run.
Exactly. But then this really powerful moment happens. This older Palestinian man, he steps in and he talks about wanting a better life for his grandson. It's about the future, not the past.
Yeah, that scene really gets to the heart of why people yearn for peace, right? It's not about ideology or politics. It's about those fundamental human desires, the hope for a better future for your children.
That's really beautiful. And it's that moment that kind of breaks the stalemate.
Powerful stuff.
It is. So the story ends, not with this fairy tale ending, but with these accords that are described as, like, messy but monumental.
Which feels very realistic.
It does. And Yasir, he quietly returns to the lab. His role is kind of done. But he shares this final conversation with Miriam overlooking this functional border crossing. It's a small victory, but it's still a victory.
Yeah, it's a subtle ending, but I think it's very effective. It underscores that, real progress is rarely neat or easy. It often involves compromise and difficult choices.
And that final discussion they have about how history might remember them is really interesting. Like, they acknowledge that their messy compromises probably won't become these legendary tales, but that maybe, they could actually lead to real improvements in people's lives.
Right. It challenges our notions of what makes someone or something historically significant.
Definitely. Okay, so we've journeyed through these two really different flash fiction stories. We've seen a rebellion against corporate power in space and this intricate, historically charged quest for peace. And both stories show how unexpected individuals and unconventional methods can really shake things up.
And it makes you think about where we see those same dynamics playing out in our own world, right?
Totally. Like, where are the challenges to establish power? How do we navigate these really complex conflicts? And who are the unexpected change makers? What really stood out to you from these stories?
I think what resonated with me the most is that real change, whether it's, holding a corporation accountable or bridging deep divides. It often requires thinking outside the box and being open to unexpected alliances and perspectives.
That's such a great takeaway. And I really hope this science fiction probe into these really compelling flash fiction stories has given you some food for thought.
Me too.
Maybe even spark some of your own aha moments. Be sure to join us next time on the True Tomorrows podcast for another deep dive into the world of flash fiction.
That's right.
Hit that rate button and follow the show so you don't miss our next weekly probe. And until then, maybe consider those unexpected possibilities for change that might be lurking just around the corner.